Now we deviate slightly from the program. The next speaker, Michiel van der Meulen, should have been here, but he apologizes for not being able to make it. His replacement in this program will be David Lawrence, and Dave has been a driving force of this whole Cost Suburban activity, mainly on the background. Dave has made it possible, that we ended up with this whole program just within the time frame, within the budget limits, and that we even had enough money to spare, to organize this final conference. So, David, thank you very much.
Okay, so many of you know me. As I was going to say, if you looked at your program and seen that it was Michiel speaking, you'll realise he's shrunk a little bit. So I'm giving this on behalf of Michiel. I said there on behalf of Michiel. He did send me some slides. To be honest, it's actually my take on what Michiel might have said. We know that if Michiel had been here, he would have been sitting, taking up what everybody was saying in the talks before and adapting it in his talk. What I'm going to do is I'm going to talk basically about the action, what we've done in the action, and about one specific product, out of sight, out of mind, the Working Group 1 report. I'm going to try and explain how we got there, why we are a little bit different from everything else we've been hearing, and how the Working Group 1 report has fed into everything else the action has been doing, and how good the report is. I have actually had quite a lot of involvement with it, so I have read it before yesterday, so I didn't know quite what to do. We've been talking a lot about the urban subsurface. A lot of the themes that I will allude to have already been covered, and I had wondered a little bit of why this talk on our city studies was coming sort of in the middle or towards the end of planning and city talks, rather than at the beginning as an introduction. But in fact, it fits very well. As we've said, urban subsurface generally doesn't concern city planners, developers, managers or people unless there is trouble. Consequently, they don't even think about it. It remains out of sight and out of mind. And it's very interesting that we've had examples today already. We've had the wonderful example from Montreal of the network of the underground space. And if you were anybody, I'm quite sure I've not been to Montreal, but if you were there and you were wandering around in Montreal, you would understand and appreciate that you were underground and how much had been done in planning that. I was in Helsinki very briefly a couple of weeks ago. Helsinki is held up in our European ideas as a master plan for the underground and how it's been done. Certainly from my point of view, if I didn't know about it and you were in Helsinki, you wouldn't have known that so much work had been put into the underground. And when we were in Ljubljana, in the sunshine in September, some of you may remember who were there that there was this wonderful open square and park area on the surface that we were very near when we went to the town hall. But not very long before, that had been car parking and everything else. And what they'd done is they'd put the car parking underneath. So often what happens, we just don't appreciate, even though it's going on. So what did cost do? How are we different? How did we decide to do anything? Well, we wanted to make people more aware of the subsurface, as Dermot told us in his very early slide. That was our whole raison d'etre. We wanted to get more people involved. We wanted them to get to know about the knowledge that there was there. So we did our best to do it. And what did we do? We set up a cost action. And Dermot proposed this, and we put quite a lot of time putting it together, and as Mary said, in 2012 it got approved, and in 2013 we started working on it. And so the first thing we did was we had our memorandum of understanding and our plan, and the first task was to review and collate our existing information. We wanted a baseline from which we could start. So what we decided to do was we decided that we would have all our people involved to talk about their cities and how their cities related to the subsurface. Working Group 1 compiled inventories of existing methods, practices, case studies, our baseline. And we would provide a state-of-the-art report eventually it came out, which would also consider requirements of city partners and highlight national local variations. And the crucial thing in these WG1 city studies was the requirements of the city partners. And we had a good number of people joined us. This was by Hamburg. We actually really, in 2013 September, the first WG1 thing really started, and a number of cities were invited to basically put forward a proposal for why they should be one of the cities that we were going to use as our first studies. And one of our requirements was that it wasn't just the geologist. It had to be in conjunction, whether formally or in many cases informally, with somebody from the city, whether it was a planner, an architect, whatever. But we had to have a city partner contributing to that report so that we got people already starting to talk. And so we carried on. We actually did this working group 1, which in the first couple of years came together with people talking, producing the reports. There was a lot presented at our conferences. The red dot diamond is of course our milestone when the report was published, or more or less. And then there's a dotted line to show that we didn't stop after we'd got those first ideas. We actually encouraged, as new people joined us, to tell us about their cities, what was going on in their city. How did we select the cities? We selected a whole variety of things. There were coastal cities, inland. We had different types of geology. We had mild climate, harsh climate, small to large cities, different planning regimes and histories, different underground construction, cultural heritage, it says, industrial legacies, ground conditions, good or bad, groundwater management. And the thing that we were looking at for these cities, we were looking at the whole city, but in addition to what we've heard from some of the earlier talks, we're not just looking at underground space as space to be used. I suppose because we came from a Northern European geological background, we're also looking at the economics of the geology, are the mineral deposits. Groundwater is very important. How do we use the water that's in the ground? Do we have geothermal energy? Do we have heat? How do we use all these? And how do we link planning for the use of those with the development and planning for underground spaces? And that was perhaps a slightly different aspect where we tried to bring everything together. Initially we selected 12 cities. You can see the cities on there. I think there's probably representatives of most of them here today. I think so, on the whole, yeah. One or two. Hamburg is not here, but otherwise I think we've got representatives here today from all of those. And of course, being geologists, we had to think about the geology. And it came in and we did it. And as has been alluded to already, as Jesus said yesterday, different places have different geology. In talking about hydrogeology, you have to look at it differently. Cities have different geology, you do have to think about it, and that maybe gives us a bit of an advantage on some others when we can put that in. So we had these cities, and we produced a series of reports. Each city, the geologist, the planner, worked together to produce quite a long, in some cases, quite a comprehensive report. The reports are, there is a selection of the reports on the table upstairs for you to look to. They're all on our website. They varied from, I think, about 12, 14 pages to, I think Rotterdam was about 100 pages or something like that, which reflected to some extent the different way that cities had used their underground, but they were all valuable. And for each of them, what we did was we had a little bit about, we then summarised them, and these summaries you could all find fairly quickly on the Suburban website. It was a bit about the city. It was obviously something about the geology, because what you can do in a city, how easy it is to do it, depends on the geology. You can probably do anything if you throw enough money at it. But some geology makes it more practical to do something economically and easily. And one of the things that comes out is that nobody's going to do anything unless they can see that there is an economic benefit from doing it, whether it be a private developer, whether it be a government. We still need to somehow persuade them it's economic. We looked at the geology. We looked at relevant information it says here. We looked at things like groundwater. Has it been looked at? What sort of data do they have? Have they used that data? Have they established databases? Do they already have models? And it was very, very different. Some have none, some were very sophisticated. Some models were very sophisticated, but they weren't being used. In which case you really, as I think Dermot or something else, maybe Helen said earlier, if you've got a model, I think it was Helen, if you've got a model and you don't use it, what's the point of having the model, really? And then we looked at the planning side of things. Whether it was legally obliged to do certain sort of aspects of planning, whether any planning was done for the underground at all. And Johan and his group have taken what was done and what we gathered for there and put a sort of new level of sophistication on that information that has been taken from us. So there were initially 12, there's actually 13 on there, but I think Vienna came in. There were initially the 12, and these are the reports that were produced. They're very interesting, very different, but very interesting. And then what was done is it produced this report. And the report offers this review of the state of the art of what was being done in the subsurface. Interactions between urban top, the subsurface, and particularly we talk about subsurface data, models, how they're used, and whether that was put into actual use by the planners. Since we did that in the last year or so, we've had 3 more complete reports at Basel, Lisbon and Valletta. Gothenburg, we've got a summary, there's a full report there. Bucharest, I believe, are producing a city report. Malmo, I think there is one on the way or almost waiting to be done for Malmo and put into the system. And these will be put onto the website. Just because the action officially finishes soon, it doesn't mean that we will stop. And this data will still be there, we sincerely hope. In the report, and at the end of it, Michael made a series of conclusions and recommendations. The idea being that these would lead into the rest of the action and would help guide what we were going to do in the other working groups and how we were going to take ourselves forward. So we argued that the best possible situation was this city that's maximised benefits and possibilities related to the subsurface in terms of resources and minimised risks, geohazards. Being good NAG City Northern European surveys, initially there was a bit of a reluctance to start thinking seriously about geohazards. Groundwater and flooding was something which was obviously very essential to many of us, and that became in. But as we've extended further east and further south, landslides, earthquake hazards have become a part of the project. Maybe not something that we would have taken up as much as we would have liked to have done, but at least we have included them now in our considerations. So we've embraced quite a lot. General conditions that must be met. And we've heard these already this morning and earlier this afternoon. There's got to be a general level of awareness, not only in our professional communities, geologists, planners, who've got to come together, but also politicians and the general public. Awareness is essential if planning is going to happen. There's got to be an understanding between us. We've got to work together and we've got to share a common language. It was something that Rob van der Grob brought up early on when we were talking about planning in an Amsterdam meeting, that we don't always talk about the same thing. Or when we talk about something, the other person doesn't understand what we're saying. We've got to get this shared language. And certainly from the geoscientific point of view, we've got to understand what the planners need, but also to be able to explain it to them. Helen was saying earlier about how we needed, maybe not to have super 3-dimensional models, but sometimes people wanted a 2D traffic light map to help them know what to do. We've got to make sure there are systems in place that capture our basic subsurface data and information, and that this baseline is met at each stage, whether it's very early planning, in fact into strategic development, or whether it's further on into detailed urban planning. And we need to have a joint vision of how we're going to develop these practices. There's needs which as yet we can't meet. We've got to persuade people how to get their investment budgets so they can actually get those needs realised. So just to finish the very end of the report, and I would commend, if you haven't looked at the report, get it down from the website, or we might be able to get some printed later on. It really is worth reading. There's a lot of information in it. And what it does is it talks about these case studies. So we presented the state of the art as a set of good practice, and in some cases not quite so good practice examples. You can consult the individual reports, you can consult this as a summary of what happens in an individual city. And good practice is different in different situations. And what we hope this helps to do, as it says there, none of our cities have got it all figured out. All the cities who were involved and wanted to be involved in writing these reports thought they were doing something useful in the underground. It was new or it was well established. So these case studies, the idea is that they could then be used, and they were fed into the next working group 2, which actually evaluated what was being done, rather than just talking about what was evaluated, is it good or bad. And then the plan was that it would go also into the working group 3, into our toolbox, so that if you were in a city of one particular sort, you could try and identify somewhere else that was similar and had similar problems, see what they've done. So there are good practice examples. Vision, awareness, we've got our Helsinki's, we've got Montreal. Information, there's some wonderful models, there's some wonderful data set up in some countries. There's some good planning that actually requires people, and people have contributed and shared information. And the ideas that one cities were doing, as I say, we identified those that in a large part they actually could be transferred between one city to a city with similar needs. And so what we did in our ensuing activities in the cost action was we tried to build it in and go on it. And this is the last slide, so you're all right. We've just tried, as we started in this working group, to give a steer to what we were going to do in the rest of the action. And I think from the talks that we've already heard, you can see that this steer actually has been quite valuable and picked up a lot of good points. There was a picture that showed the Working Group 2 report, which just had the underground all coloured in and the overground not coloured in, which was at the end of this slide. But I've taken it out because we're not looking at just having one bit coloured in. We're looking at the model whereby it actually builds up, as we've got in Oslo, where it starts below and it actually builds up underground. Or as Han just showed us in these amazing pit videos, how you actually go from the underground and you link it with the overground, which is what the next stage is, how we link what we're doing with what's happening above. That's maybe out of sight, out of mind, but we're trying to make sure it isn't.
After what I said before about David, it should not have come as a surprise that he was also able to deliver his presentation within the time frame. Any questions for David?
Yeah.
No questions?
No questions.
Okay.
Questions? Yeah?
Yeah, that was a very nice and clear presentation, but I wonder if you try to make any synthesis effort to try to draw some general conclusions on how cities are conditioned by their geology, their hydrology, or whatever. At least your case.
There is a little bit of that in the back of the report, some fairly sort of general conclusions, but there is some of that in the report, but there wasn't time to talk about it there, but it is worth looking at to see what there is there. And if you really want to know, you speak to Mikael, because he has it all in his head.
Okay, thank you very much, David. The next speaker